Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 101 of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Taking a little bit of time off, but we are back here and lots to talk about in the NBA today. Of course, NBA free agency set to begin in just a few days. The draft just happened a few days ago, and some big news with some of the most dramatic players in the NBA, Kyrie Irving and Russell Westbrook. And we might as well start with the Kyrie Irving fiasco because he is opting into his contract with Brooklyn. It's been very complicated, but I still have my doubts. There's more reports from Brian Windhorst this morning that there's still the possibility that he's going to go to LA if there's any sort of trade they could work out. But there's still a lot of problems here because if Kyrie Irving is opting into the salary, now he's locked into $37 million. And I don't know what the Lakers are going to do to clear that because Russell Westbrook has opted into his contract. So there's really no way. The only way I thought this was possible is if Kyrie took a major pay cut and was willing to do the $6 million exception to play with the Lakers, which, truth be told, I kind of thought was possible because Kyrie, if there's any star that doesn't really care about the money, it's Kyrie Irving. He was willing to sit out and avoid being paid last year because of the vaccine fiasco. And, going to LA, I think he wants to have a post-NBA career. LA is the perfect place for that. But Kyrie Irving right now staying with the Nets, and obviously that sets the stage for Kevin Durant to not request a trade. So Rahill, I'll go to you first. I mean, what do you think we're even going to see with the Nets at this point? Do you think Kyrie is definitely going to be playing for them in the fall? And, what's going on with this team?
Yeah, he'll be playing for them in the fall because the problem, as you said, Eddie, he opted into the deal. The only way he was going to leave is if he opted out and took the $6 million exception with the Lakers. I mean, all the teams he listed, first of all, have no interest in him. And the Lakers were the only one that had interest. But like you said, they have zero cap space. So the only possible way I could see a sign and trade getting done is if the Lakers are willing to give up Anthony Davis. But we all know that's not going to happen. They want to keep LeBron and AD together because what will the Lakers package for a sign and trade deal? Like, let's be completely honest here. What you throw in, first of all, you don't even have any picks because you gave those away for the Anthony Davis trade with the Pelicans. So there's literally nothing you can package to get Kyrie Irving. And so I think Kyrie's going to realize his only option is to stay in Brooklyn because he wants to go to a competitive team. And the only teams that could actually trade for him and maybe give him the extension he's looking for are teams that are like the Magic, lower echelon teams. So I think Kyrie Irving quickly realized I can't go anywhere else. I'm going to probably he'll hopefully fully commit to Brooklyn, show teams that he can be at least reliable and not a you-know-what for a season. And then he'll go into free agency. Maybe the Brooklyn Nets then give him a large extension or someone else comes along. Maybe he goes to Los Angeles. I don't know. But I expect both of them to be there with Brooklyn. And I mean, we'll see. Joe Harris is coming back. Ben Simmons, who knows what the situation is there. He's going to most likely, I hope, play at some point. But so we'll see. I mean, it's been disappointing, this situation. But if they can just both stay healthy, that's the main thing. But given the Brooklyn Nets, something else is probably going to pop up that we have no idea about.
Yeah, but one other thing that I think works out with this, the Nets, I still think, they made the best of the James Harden situation last year when they made that trade. And regardless of what happens with Ben Simmons, they still got Seth Curry, Drummond, and picks, all things that they needed, all voids that they needed to be filled to make them a better team now and in the future. And having Kyrie Irving opt in, if things go south next year, because while this team has an incredibly talented roster, we've seen what's happened to Brooklyn, and they also do not have a capable head coach. And, if things go badly, they could always trade Kyrie Irving at the deadline and, a very similar situation with Harden and at least get something for him, something where I think teams would be a little more desperate at that time of the deadline versus now, during free agency when there's many solid guards available on the market and many that carry much less baggage than Kyrie Irving. But Kyrie right now back on the Nets. Tim, your feelings on the Nets going forwards, with Kyrie there, expecting Kevin Durant to stay. I mean, I didn't really think Kevin Durant was going to be requesting a trade anyway. I think he was willing to commit to another year with this team. And we don't know what's going to happen with Ben Simmons, but where do the Nets stack up heading into the Eastern Conference this year?
I mean, talent-wise, the Nets still stack up decently, but it's the fact of the matter of, well, is it talent of 2022? Or am I banking on talent from like 2015, 2016? And what I mean by that is let's be honest. I mean, Kevin Durant is a top-notch player. He was my pick, if you remember, all the way back to the preseason of before the season, where I said, "Hey, I think KD's going to win MVP this year." I thought the Nets were going to go all the way, and obviously, that was far, far from the reality. But to me, for Kyrie Irving to come back, could it be a positive sign in regards to commitment? And he's realized the situation that there's really nowhere else he can go, and that he needs to play for Brooklyn and live up to the promise, which he hasn't to this point. It could be a positive thing, but I just don't feel this team is as good as what it was anticipated when both of these players signed to be the Brooklyn Nets. Kyrie Irving hasn't played anywhere near the level Kyrie Irving did all the way back in Cleveland. Kevin Durant, let's be honest, has stepped down a little bit in terms of versatility since his injury. Now, Kevin Durant is still an excellent player. I'm not ignoring that. He is still a very top-notch player, but these guys aren't the same players they were 2-3 years ago, and that's okay. But the fact of the matter is, this team needs depth. It still needs depth. But when you can't pay anyone to bring in depth because you're paying in so much money, I mean, so, between the three, I mean, when you look at it, obviously, yeah, they traded away James Harden after making that deal, but the amount of money, let's say if they didn't trade James Harden, the amount of money just between the three of those players would have never allowed the Nets to even, for example, get a Seth Curry, get an Andre Drummond. Granted, of course, they get him out of trade pieces, but just the amount of money they invested would not allow them to do that. And the money they're still investing, I don't know if the Nets can really get pure depth pieces unless it doesn't come at a high price. So for me, for Brooklyn, yeah, you still have talent, but unfortunately, and I'm a big advocate again, I say every year, change. You want to win a championship, something needs to change, and it needs to change drastically if you're not seeing consistent results. I think the move that unfortunately Brooklyn has to make and isn't going to be able to make because of clauses is you have to trade Kyrie Irving. I think that's the only way, and I think you have to trade him to a mid-tier team. An example, I've always been an advocate. I want to see him get traded in a big package, maybe with picks, so on, for Donovan Mitchell. I'd love to see Donovan Mitchell in Brooklyn. I think that would be the answer. They need to change this team and become something somewhat consistent. But at the same time, it's not realistic. And the only way Kyrie Irving's going to go somewhere if it's a big market team, and those big market teams are filled right now. So I just don't see it happening, unfortunately, anytime soon for the Brooklyn Nets, which unfortunately means I have zero expectations for them this year. If they win a championship, they surprise, great. That's just like I'll say for the New York Yankees. Surprise me, prove me wrong. But at the end of the day, I see no future for the Brooklyn Nets, and this team has been complacent to this point.
Yeah, I agree. There were a lot of holes on this team, for example, after the year they were eliminated by the Bucks that they could have filled in the offseason, and they really didn't do that, especially filling out that bench. They had a very, very weak bench last year that got exposed when they had their COVID issues in December, and then the injury bug when they lost Durant, when Harden wasn't playing and wanted to be forced out, and they just had too many wing shooters on the team, and they didn't have enough bigs. And even when you added Andre Drummond, it wasn't enough. It was Drummond and Claxton, and both of them can get bodied in the paint easily, and they both can't shoot free throws. So, and that's your two bigs. So the Nets still have things they have to fix. Speaking of teams that have things to fix, the Los Angeles Lakers didn't even make it to the playoffs last year, but they've got the second highest paid player in the NBA coming back to them, Russell Westbrook, opting in. He's going to be paid $47 million this season. And I know last year was a little bit of an outlier from his performance in the past. Even the year with the Wizards, just 1 year before, I think people completely forget about how good Russell Westbrook was during that season with the Washington Wizards. They made the playoffs. Bradley Beal was hurt for much of the season, Westbrook was able to carry them. He had 36 triple doubles in the full season. He still played really well. Last year, he just couldn't fit into the Lakers system. So Rahill, with him likely coming back, and I mean, I don't think the Lakers are making that many drastic moves because A, they don't have much money, and B, they don't have many people that they can trade right now that are valuable assets for other teams. That being said, do you think there's a chance that Russell Westbrook can fit better in year 2 in LA and make the Lakers a more competitive team?
No, I think that's what you're going to get with Westbrook. And the main reason is in Washington, he was able to get the lion's share of handling the basketball. But we all know when LeBron James is on your team, you're not going to do that because LeBron likes to run the point as well. And obviously, who wouldn't like to run the point when you're that good of a passer? So then Westbrook is relegated to the wings. I don't think people realize this, first of all, but he doesn't help the Lakers in that he doesn't play any defense. Like, he only plays hard on the offensive side of the ball. I don't see him play defense. The Lakers still, even if they were to get someone like a Kyrie Irving, they can't guard anyone. I mean, LeBron James can still guard some people, but what is he, 38 years old now? Anthony Davis is probably their best defender. He's always hurt. Carmelo Anthony didn't play defense to begin with. He's getting older. I mean, who on that team can play defense besides when they had Dwight Howard for a little bit? Nobody, because they're all old and they can't stay in front of guys. So I don't see how this works. I mean, the only possible way is if Westbrook somehow changes his game up. But when you're someone like Westbrook who's won a league MVP, broken all these records, what makes you think he's going to change? He's still going to try his best to get to the, and first of all, he's also losing his step. You look at his finishing at the rim when it comes to dunking and stuff, it's way off. He missed a career high in dunks last year. I don't think people realize that. So his athleticism is also waning a little bit. And then you see he's getting worse and worse from the free throw line. Ever since he shot 80% 1 year in Oklahoma City, it's been downhill here and there. His stop and pop game, he's hitting the side of the backboard. I don't know what you can do to make that person fit in unless you somehow relegate him to the bench. But they tried it last year for a couple games and they went straight back to him in the starting rotation. I don't know how you're going to get it because Kevin Durant bailed on him for a reason. He can't be on my team and I cannot trust him to make the right decision at the right time. So, and the thing is, he's not going to take a backseat to anyone. I mean, even LeBron James, he's that strong-minded. He won't take a back seat. So, I mean, maybe they can try and figure something out, but they also got a new coach. That doesn't help either. And Westbrook claimed that Frank Vogel didn't like him when he called him out for not playing well. So I have no idea, Eddie. I really don't think it's going to work. I think the Lakers are probably going to float this season again. Maybe Anthony Davis can stay healthy and shoot a basketball, which apparently he hasn't done since April 5th. But they'll probably float this season again. I think they'll get into the play-in. They'll probably get bounced in the first couple of rounds because the West is so loaded, and then just unload Westbrook's contract and go from there.
Yeah, I think they're going to improve from last year, but I don't think it's going to be, leaps and bounds because there's just too many good teams in the West. The Warriors are still going to be great. Phoenix, I think, is going to bounce back because that was a horrible ending to their playoff run. Denver's still got Jokic. Memphis still has Ja Morant. The Clippers, who we'll get to in a few minutes, have some nice pieces on their team. So, Tim, I want to get your perspective as well on where the Lakers are going after this season.
Yeah, I think they're going to do a little bit better than last season. But again, just like, for example, on the opposite side, just talking about Brooklyn, if the Lakers are healthy, the Lakers will play solid basketball. It's a big if. But it's the fact of the matter of they haven't been healthy. They haven't been able to turn around and play as a fluent offense or even a complementary defense. It's unfortunate to say that, unfortunately, LA was never really that good. Outside of the one run they had where they won the championship, this team was not playoff worthy, struggled. I mean, LeBron, for the first time in forever, missed the playoffs with his first year in LA. And yet again, this year, misses the playoffs. To me, the Lakers overall, as a unit, as an organization, that's sad to say with how much legacy they have in the NBA and how many championships they've won, but they're dysfunctional. They're just a big market team that plays in a big city that doesn't have big mind thinking or a big understanding, it seems of late, to how to win basketball games and how to win a championship. And it's unfortunate because, again, maybe it's the fact that they haven't transitioned to the modern style game, which is a big possibility. The basketball in general has changed a lot over the last 10 to 12 years, but we're seeing a lot of teams that have popped into the transition. Of course, Golden State Warriors, the biggest of them all, transitioning to a new style and turning it into multiple championships. But a lot of the reasons why we're seeing teams that are competitive is not, yeah, you have stars, don't get me wrong, but of late, the teams that are competing for championships, they have depth to understand perimeter defense. They have depth to play solid perimeter offense. They have the capabilities of having a good passing and a good attack as well. And it's, now everything's all about scoring, but I feel like the Lakers in the past, what is this team, let's be honest, built around? Offensive scoring and a soft defense. And as the Boston Celtics proved this year, that's not going to happen. You want to win a championship. Granted, Boston didn't win a championship, but you want to get that far, you have to play complementary defense to a good complementary offense. If you can't do that, you'll never win a championship. And the fact of the matter is, the Lakers are still far from a championship. The only way they're going to get back into the mix, unfortunately, and this has nothing, in my opinion, to do with Russell Westbrook. It just has to do with the money of Russell Westbrook. You raise that salary, you have a chance to rebuild, especially the fact that they don't have picks. But that's not happening, at least this year. Will happen next year. But I see the Lakers far, far, far. We'll see what happens next season.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just such a weird scenario because I hate to call it a fluke from 2 years ago with them making the run. And I don't think I get annoyed with people who call it a Mickey Mouse championship because it was still a very difficult run. And the scenario, it was a very difficult championship to win. But it's just night and day with how that team looked compared to what we've seen from the Lakers the other 3 years that LeBron James has been on this team. And you really wonder, what else are they capable of with this group? And unfortunately, the Lakers are just so boxed in right now because of these high salaries that they don't have anything that they can really do at this point. So they're kind of just hoping that they can tread water and do enough to get into the playoffs and hoping that LeBron continues to hold up. 37 years old and nearly led the league in scoring last year. Still very impressive and still a great player. You got to hope Anthony Davis is healthy. Russell Westbrook takes steps in the positive direction. And some of these young prospects start to pan out a little more. Because, go ahead.
Don't forget this. Every person they've brought in has not worked out over the last 2 years. Think about it. They've brought in guards, obviously Russell Westbrook after Schroeder, and it's like, goodness. For example, I just couldn't have imagined the fact that they would have had this much trouble, at least trying to find someone decent in free agency that could play complementary basketball. But the fact of the matter is, every person, doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the experience, everyone they've brought in either gets injured or just does not play good flow with the team. And yes, the coaching change could help that a little bit, but let's be honest, LeBron James is the GM and the coach, and you're not changing that. So the fact of the matter is that they need to find a way to play good, consistent basketball with what they have. And the simplistic answer is they don't have the capabilities of that right now because there's nobody that plays similar style basketball or has a similar understanding other than maybe LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But when it's all said and done, those two aren't carrying anyone to a championship in today's modern basketball.
Yeah. But I want to shift gears now to the other LA team. That's the Clippers. And it seems like the first block that will fall with a player changing teams in this offseason is John Wall, who's only played 40 games over the last 3 years. Last time he played a full season, he was an all-star, but that's a while back now. The former Wizard and Houston Rocket expected to be bought out of his high-level contract of $30+ million with the Rockets and expected to sign with the LA Clippers, who, of course, last year did not have Kawhi Leonard for the entire season. Paul George had a solid year, but also dealt with injuries, and the Clippers were not able to make it out of the play-in round, but they've got a solid coach, of course, in Ty Lue. They've got some solid bench pieces as well. Rahill, where do you see the Clippers going? I don't think John Wall is going to be a huge impactful player for this team. I think the bigger question is what you get from Kawhi Leonard after missing an entire season of NBA play.
Yeah, the John Wall deal. I mean, it doesn't. First of all, we don't know what John Wall looks like. I mean, I would love to see this man back at his athletic best like he was in Washington, but that's probably not going to happen. So as far as that deal goes, I mean, I guess it's a good move just because you get a veteran guy who can handle the basketball for depth, just in case someone else goes down. And like Tim and like we've all alluded to, you need depth because injuries now are at an all-time high, so you need to stock up. But yeah, it's all about Kawhi Leonard and Paul. I'm really high on the Clippers this year. I think they can genuinely give. They're a top team in the Western Conference. I think they're in the mix for a title because, I mean, they didn't have Kawhi the whole season. Paul George missed, I want to say, good like half or maybe even more of the season. They still made it to the play-in game. They were treading above 500 the whole season, and Ty Lue proved like he's a very like people always used to bash him, when he was in Cleveland, like, oh, he's not that good of a coach. He's showing why he is a really good coach. He gets the best out of every single player that's there. Reggie Jackson has come off giving them stable presence. Another thing I love about this group is their chemistry to me is so good. Remember what happened with the Clippers in the bubble? They fell apart because their chemistry wasn't there. There was problems in the inner locker room. But it seems like when they made that run to the conference finals, even without Kawhi Leonard, who didn't play after game 4 of the Utah series, the Utah series, it seemed like they were really gelling together pretty well. So I think I expect that with a full season of Clippers basketball. And I think this team can win a championship. I really do. I think I can see them beating the Warriors out because let's remind you, Kawhi Leonard is still a top defender. Paul George is still a great defender. I think Reggie Jackson's also a decent defender. So they play good complementary basketball in all aspects of the game. I think Kawhi Leonard will be just fine. He doesn't really rely on athleticism that much. His defense might take a hit, but I think he'll be just fine to play. And I'm high on the Clippers this year. I think they're a championship caliber team.
Yeah, and we saw how important defense was this postseason run. The fact that the Warriors and the Celtics were the last two teams standing, easily the two best defenses in the NBA this season. So John Wall, I think, adds to that, but there's still questions, of course, with the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard's health. Last NBA thing I want to touch on, the NBA draft happened the other night. I'm wearing an Orlando Magic shirt, not a Magic fan per se, but, I do like the direction that the team is going, and Paolo Banchero, I think, was a great number 1 pick. Woj, by the way, had it wrong. He was saying that it was going to be Jabari Smith throughout the day, and Banchero went number 1. I think he was really explosive at Duke. I think he has a very high ceiling. I think he has a higher ceiling than Jabari Smith, and I think it was a great move by the Magic, who are continuing this rebuild right now, have brought in some solid pieces over the last couple of years. But number 2 in that draft was Chet Holmgren going to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, the Thunder, they have the ability to, take a couple of wild card picks because this is a team that has so many first-round draft picks over the next 6 or 7 years. They're going to get a lot of talent, and they already have some young talent on that team, whether it's Josh Giddey, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and now you add Holmgren. But Tim, Holmgren is unique. He is very thin. He has a very small build despite being so tall. And Gonzaga does not have a great history of producing NBA players that stick. So how well do you think Holmgren's game is going to translate to the NBA? And should the Thunder have taken him at number 2?
I think they should have, and I'm glad they did because I'm going to be honest with you. I really think, I don't want to say he's exactly a unicorn like they like to say for a lot of these tall players, for example, all the way back to Porzingis when he was drafted. But Chet is a unique body player. And honestly, if he can gain just a little bit of weight, rather if that's a muscle and so on, I promise you, he's going to be a dominant force in the NBA. I mean, Chet looks promising. And I'll tell you this, Eddie, obviously, typically when we talk with Tyler Glass about how he gets a little bit antsy about certain things, he's a diehard Oklahoma City fan and he wanted no one else of course, if he can get who goes number 1, he would have been happy. But he wanted Chet all along. And the fact that he's an Oklahoma City Thunder player, he can live with that. But I really do think that as long as they can get a little bit of weight on Chet, and they can, the big thing that always worries me about 7-foot players in general, can you keep them healthy? If he could stay healthy, I think he can be a dominant force in the NBA. His size is something you can't teach. You can't grow that ability. how you utilize his size, how you make him physical, how you can make him play in the post, or he can, mix a little bit of the shooting game in and balance, just like how we're seeing with a lot of bigs today. That's going to be a powerful component. But I think this is the first step, honestly, Oklahoma City needs after that surprise playoff run a few years back, where they can turn around here and really start finding themselves with this young talent in their goal. And this was definitely, I think Chet is going to be a good player in the NBA. If he doesn't have the best of first years, give him some time. But I'd say he's going to be a good candidate for Rookie of the Year this year, in my opinion. And I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity this season to prove exactly why he deserved to go there at number 2.
Well, also shout out, since I'm a Rutgers person, Ron Harper Jr. signing a 2-way contract with the Toronto Raptors immediately after the draft ended. So best of luck to him up north of the border with the Raptors. I think it could be a good fit. That's a team that's developed a lot of players that have gone second round undrafted, kind of flown below the radar, that have become solid NBA players. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Chris Boucher, just to name a few. So I think a great fit for Harper. Well, about 10 minutes left in this show. Let's switch to Major League Baseball. And I want to pose a question to you guys that I did on my radio show last night too. Now, the Yankees just finished up a series with the Astros. They got no hit in that series. In fact, got no hit for 16 consecutive innings. But in the latter game on Sunday, they were able to come back from down 3-0, break up the no-hitter, win it on a walk-off. They have 10 walk-offs this season. Aaron Judge has 3 of them, and the Yankees are still cruising with the best record in baseball. But my question I'll throw into the ring, and I'll give it to Rahill first. Now, the Yankees got tested by the Astros, really got tested over the last couple of weeks by Tampa Bay and Toronto as well. Were able to tread water and still keep up the solid record. The Mets, they've already played the Dodgers this year, and they split that series at Chavez Ravine without DeGrom, Scherzer, McGill, or Carrasco pitching in that 4-game series. Trevor Williams started a game, and the Dodgers had a healthy rotation then with Walker Buehler starting a game, Clayton Kershaw as well. So, Rahill, my question is this. Who is the bigger test going down the stretch? The Astros for the Yankees or the Dodgers for the Mets?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm just going to say the Astros for the Yankees, just because even if you take out the whole sign stealing, cheating scandal, whatever, the Astros have had the Yankees number for the last 6-7 years. They knocked them out in the wild card game, I believe, in 2015. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's the 2017, 2019 ALCSs. And the Yankees have struggled with the Astros just in general. Because, again, I will say this again. The Astros did not need to cheat to win the World Championship in 2017. Jose Altuve is still an unbelievable hitter. He'll be a walk-in Hall of Famer without the trash cans. Alex Bregman, unbelievable. Yordan Alvarez, who's having an unbelievable year, okay? And the Astros, they just find a way to win these games. Everyone kind of underrates them. People are talking about the Yankees right now. The Red Sox are getting hot. But again, don't count out the Astros. So I'm just going to say, because of that, I'm going to go with the Astros. But that being said, you can't ignore the Dodgers. The Dodgers roster is just almost, it's too good not to win. Especially with adding Freddie Freeman. So that's a really difficult question, Eddie. But I'm just going to say, because of the past history between these two teams, it's going to be the Yankees trying to overcome the Astros, because the Astros have given the Yankees all sorts of fits, no matter where they play them and when. So they'll play each other again on Thursday. So for that reason, I'm going to say the Astros over the Yankees.
Yeah, and there's another factor too, because I agree with you. I say the Astros are the tougher test than the Dodgers. I feel like there are Dodgers players now. I'm not saying they can't turn it around during the second half of the season, but there are many players in that Dodgers roster who are really underperforming. Max Muncy got sent to the minors for a while. Cody Bellinger has not been the same since his 2019 MVP bid. Justin Turner has struggled. They've dealt with some injuries as well now with their pitching rotation. They just lost Daniel Hudson for the remainder of the season. He had been their most consistent middle reliever. I just feel like this is the type of year where the Mets had kind of lucked out, because there were a lot of NL teams with serious questions. The Braves, of course, the big question is being able to repeat. We have not seen many teams repeat winning World Series. You got to go all the way back. Even when the Giants were great 10 years ago, they'd always have a bad year. Then they'd come back and win the World Series. They did twice that way. And, you got to go back to the Yankee dynasty. The last time you had teams repeating as World Series champions. I don't see that with this Braves roster, especially now losing Ozzie Albies. Ronald Acuna Jr. has barely played this season. They don't have Freddie Freeman anymore. They've had issues with Eddie Rosario. They don't have as solid of a pitching staff as last year. So there's questions there with the Braves. The Dodgers have had injuries. I know how great that roster is on paper, but I just don't feel like it's as good as it's been in previous years. And the Padres have not had Fernando Tatis Jr. the entire year. Somehow Tatis is still fifth among shortstops in all-star voting, even though he hasn't played since September, which I don't even want to get into. But, the Padres had that major collapse last year. And really, to me, those are the three main threats. The Cardinals, they've got Goldschmidt, they've got Arenado. I don't trust that pitching staff going down the stretch and relying on 40-year-old Adam Wainwright to try to carry them deep into a postseason run. So I feel like the Mets kind of have an easier path than the Yankees do, even though the Yankees might be the better team record-wise right now. Tim, your opinions?
I think the Astros series is, in my opinion, the bigger battle. I mean, nothing against LA. I just think that LA is not as good of a team as what it was the last 2-3 years. But I just do want to point out they could change that in the deadline too. Every team's gonna have an opportunity, and LA is a team that, as we've proven now over the last 3-4 seasons, they're not complacent. They know what they're doing out over there in Dodger land. So they'll figure it out. If it's not a World Series run for them this year, they'll continue to make at least late postseason runs every year with how good that franchise has been. But in terms of and I said this to Rahill going into the series before the first series a few days ago. This is a statement series, the New York Yankees, in regards to this. You need to beat Houston, or you need to be competitive with Houston Astros and treat this like this is the ALCS. You need to prove that you're good enough and have the upper hand to beat the Houston Astros. And unfortunately, here's the realism of a 4-game series, okay? The Yankees won game 1, didn't serve game 1. They didn't show up till past the 7th inning, and they got handed a game because the Astros walked them around the bases. Turnaround game 2, didn't show the offense, lost 3-0. Turnaround following day, got no hit. Turned around the following day, got no hit all the way until Stanton hit a home run. I think it was in the 7th inning. And then they came back late. Houston dominated, innings-wise, dominated every single game. Houston's pitching was on point. The Yankees pitching, ironically, at this point, struggling, but we can live with that. That's okay. Listen, there's going to be ups and downs pitching. No one said the Yankees were going to have pitching struggles. The problem is for the Yankees, the pitching struggles came when your offense starts to struggle. Giancarlo Stanton only has, I think it's 9 hits this month in the month of June, and 7 of them are home runs. 1 of them's a double. He has 1 single. He's now batting barely above a 240. Aaron Judge was batting a 313 just a mere week and a half ago, and now he's batting below the 300 mark. DJ LeMahieu is not what he once was. He's barely batting a 270. Jose Trevino's been a surprise. Yeah, he's still batting around the 270 mark. IKF's been great. Don't get me wrong. But the Yankees don't have an average hitter. They don't. It's the fact of the matter. And the Yankees, if you want to beat the Houston Astros, you got to hit. And what the Houston Astros proved, I don't care if they split the series, the Yankees hit the long ball late in both games that, provided them 2 big victories in a late going of comeback victories. You want to beat the Houston Astros, you sure as well damn got to hit. And the Yankees can't do that still. And yeah, they may be going through a slump now, but I advocate every year, power. It's not going to win you a World Series. Consistency, getting on base. And the talk for the Yankees this year, going into the year, especially if you listen to a lot of WFAN, which really makes me laugh because I've talked about it ever since the start of Sports Speak. I like average hitting. I'm all for average. All of a sudden now average is in the conversation again for baseball as an important statistic. Get me a JD Martinez. Not saying the Yankees, can trade from, of course, Boston's on a playoff run, but get me a JD Martinez style player. Get me a Yordan Alvarez. Why? because I don't care if you hit for power on a consistent basis. Now, Yordan Alvarez is a freak offensively. Yeah, they're a lack defensively. The Yankees have been, let's be honest, this year a solid defensive team since the transition. But you have nobody that can get on base 1/3 of the time. You have nobody that can, really be consistently there. Josh Donaldson, not the answer. And yeah, Aaron Hicks hit a clutch 3-run home run. That's great, but he's still an awful player. Joey Gallo shouldn't even exist. The fact of the matter is, for the Yankees, I would trade Joey Gallo for cash. That's how bad he is. You're not getting a piece with Joey Gallo. The only way you're getting pieces is if you trade minor league depth. And the only way the Yankees are getting any value is if they trade away Jason Dominguez or maybe Anthony Volpe. The Yankees farm system isn't good. So the fact of the matter is, for the New York Yankees, you want to win a World Series, this team is worthy of making a piece at the deadline, but also knowing Brian Cashman, the Yankees won't deal anything at the deadline because the Yankees are always complacent. Matt Carpenter also, by the way, been surprised since he's come here, but he also isn't the answer. So what is the answer for the Yankees? And will they find it? My thing is, I'd love to see the Yankees go get another first baseman. Anthony Rizzo, flip-flopping around DH, have Stanton as well mixing DH in the field. But I like a guy like Garrett Cooper, CJ Cron, that are putting spectacular numbers where they are. I think they would be solid answers to complement an Anthony Rizzo who has good power. But there's also options around the infield or outfield, and the Yankees need another outfielder. And the big thing is the Yankees need bullpen pitching. They need more help in the bullpen. There is inconsistency left and right, no matter what the statistics show. You can't trust anyone in big moments, outside of one person, of course. But at the end of the day, the Yankees, I feel, record-wise, are on a potential run, but they're in trouble. That's the fact of the matter.
And I think it's funny you brought that up, because one argument that a Yankee fan made is that you can't compare things to 2019 or 2017 because Aroldis Chapman won't be pitching in a big spot. Well, you don't know that for sure, because outside of Clay Holmes, and sure, Clay Holmes could be pitching in the 9th inning. Game goes 10, you could have Aroldis Chapman in then. 8th inning, you could have Aroldis Chapman in then. And a home run in the 8th or 10th could be just as impactful as one in the 9th. So, I don't really get the validity of that argument, but I agree. Yankees might have the better record than the Mets. The Yankees have certainly proved it with how well they played over the last couple of weeks, but I think the Yankees, there's still questions here, and I think the Astros, as has been the norm over the past few years, are going to continue to prove to be a big test and a big hurdle for the Yankees if they want to win the World Series in 2022. Well, good stuff. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Sports Speak. We appreciate Rahill Jaiswal from the Nothing But Sports podcast joining us as always. We'll be back next week. Stay tuned for that. NBA free agency should be in full swing then. 4th of July coming up as well. We hope you have a great 4th of July weekend. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
And this is Sports Speak. We hope you have a great rest of your week.